So I've got a bunch of pairs of these wireless guitar systems. I bought this pair a few years ago and they're cool. Now I'm famous, so companies just send them to me. Every time I make videos about them, there's some comments that talk about how the latency in these is too much. Which, if that's the case, then I agree, and more power to you. But I've got 3 sets now, 2 of them clocked in at 6 milliseconds, 1 of them clocked in at 8 milliseconds. And sometimes it's honestly pretty hard to think about numbers that small. So what I'm gonna do in this video is I'm gonna control the latency. I'm gonna play guitar through an amp where I can manipulate the latency. And I'm gonna show you and talk about what it feels like to play guitar with that kind of latency between the guitar and when it comes out the amp. So just to be clear, we're talking about the amount of time between playing a note on the guitar and hearing it out your amp. So let's say with this pack, which I bought years ago from Getaria, G-E-T-A-R-A, Getaria. This had a 6 millisecond latency compared to a cable. So that means when I use these, when I hit a note on the guitar, 6 milliseconds later, it came out the amp, which I found perfectly usable. Used them all the time live. It was lovely. I had no issues. Did some videos on them and people were telling me that they could notice 6 milliseconds, 6 1,000ths of a second, which is pretty wild in my opinion. Now I understand if you're producing a track and you move something 6 milliseconds off, then it might be noticeable because it's 6 milliseconds compared to other stuff. But actually playing, I have a hard time believing. Just for reference, sound travels at about 1 foot per millisecond. So the equivalent of using these standing right next to your amp would be using a cable and standing 6 feet away from your amp. That would be about the same latency. So I took those comments as like, I can't stand 6 feet away from my guitar amp, which I just don't think that's accurate. I'm not saying 6 milliseconds is good or bad. I just think the amount of people in my comments saying that was unusable was pretty high for what I thought it was. So it's surprising, that's all. And if that's the case, more power to you. I'm not telling you what to do, I'm not telling you what to buy. I just wanna do some tests, show you some cool stuff, and just kind of put the facts out there. I just think when you actually listen with your ears and not with your eyes, a lot of that falls apart. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna plug my guitar into my computer, and I'm gonna have my computer output to this little amp. And then we're gonna listen on my phone's microphone. And I'm hopefully gonna have the settings where you can hear both this guitar acoustically and the amp. I'll play the guitar, you'll hear the difference between this and this, or you won't. And then I'll talk about how it feels, because that's a big part of it. And we're gonna see just how many milliseconds we can get to before I notice and before you notice. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's get into it. We've got the guitar, we got the amp going in. Now the way I'm gonna add latency is I have my guitar running through Reaper, and then I have redelay on the channel, and then it's output into the amp. So I only have the wet signal going through redelay. So I'm gonna manually add 1 single delay for a certain amount of milliseconds. So right now it's at 0. I think my system runs at about 5 milliseconds latency, so we're gonna account for that as well. So starting at 0, this is what 5 milliseconds latency sounds like. I can't hear a lag with that. You probably can't either. I'm gonna add 5 milliseconds. So now we're at a total of 10 milliseconds here. I don't hear a lag, I don't feel a lag. So with that, we're already past all the wireless that I have. So this is 10 milliseconds of latency. That's why I have a hard time believing those comments of 6 milliseconds is too much. Have you stood 6 feet away from your amp? That is the equivalent. Let's go to an extreme example. Let's add 200 milliseconds of latency. Okay, technically it's 205, but this is 200 milliseconds of latency. You hear that? Can't play with that. That's way too much. Way too much. So let's go back down to 10, and then we'll go up by 5 milliseconds, and we'll just see how much we can get before we reach the threshold of me tolerating it and feeling it and stuff like that. Here's 5 milliseconds. I'm sorry, that was 10 milliseconds. Let's go up to 15 milliseconds. This is now 15 milliseconds. I don't hear anything, I don't feel anything. I'm not saying that's a good latency to aim for, but we're at 15 milliseconds and I don't feel anything. And I'm trying to notice. 20 milliseconds of latency, 20. I can maybe hear it. "25 milliseconds of latency now. Still nothing for me. Maybe? Okay, I can hear that a little bit. If I focus really hard. If I focus really hard, I can start to hear that, but that is not going to stop me from using it. Okay, the more I hear it, the more I play. So that's 25 milliseconds? Yeah, I don't like that. It's not terrible. It's not throwing me off at all, but I can definitely notice it. Let's keep going. 30 milliseconds. Okay, I'm definitely noticing it now. It's not a deal breaker. It's weird. And that's the equivalent of standing 30 feet away from your guitar amp. Yeah, I would not use that. If I had to, I could, but if I had a choice, I wouldn't use that. This is 50 milliseconds. I definitely feel that. That sounds like a slapback delay. So I still feel like around 20 or 25 milliseconds is my threshold. That's when I notice it, and that's when it can become a problem. 10 milliseconds though, no problems. Under 10, no problems. Now, if you're more sensitive to me and can hear that stuff, and if it affects you, that's perfectly fine. Then use a cable or get a nicer wireless that has lower latency. I've got no issues with that. I just feel that a lot of the people that would comment that type of stuff haven't actually tried. So I don't know. This is just my thoughts. I've been in the guitar community for a long time. I've said stuff that I don't agree with anymore. I've done stuff that didn't make sense. And maybe this will be one of those videos, but where I'm sitting right now, under 20 milliseconds, I'm not gonna have a problem with that. Not what you should aim for. It's not great. Anything under 10, I'm not even gonna notice. So if you can, the less latency you have, the better. Because latency adds up. Let's say you wanted, for some reason, you wanted to run a completely wireless pedal board. So you have two sets of these, one from the guitar to the pedal board and then pedal board to the amp. Well, now you're at 12 milliseconds of latency. And let's say you use in-ear monitors. And let's just say for the sake of argument that those add 6 more milliseconds of latency. So from the time you play the note to actually hear it in your ears, you're at 18 milliseconds of latency. That's pushing it then. So the lower latency you can get, the better. But for my purpose when I bought these, and I would occasionally run in-ears, I never measured the latency of the in-ears. But these were perfectly fine. So the latency never threw me off with these. And playing wireless on stage is infinitely more fun than playing through a cable. So I don't know what I wanted you to take away from this. I just wanted to show you a real life example from an average musician of how much latency affects us. And hopefully this demonstration comes through okay, and that it just kind of gives you a real example of what those actual latency times sound like. So I think that's all I got for you. If you guys have any questions or feedback for me, tell me how to do this experiment better. Tell me how to communicate this better. If you have anything for me at all, leave a comment. I'll try to get back to you. I have links to almost all of my music gear in the description if you're interested. And I think that's all I have for you today. So again, if you got anything for me, leave a comment. I'll get back to you. Either way, thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.